I'm joined now by Ries, author of The Lean Startup. Eric, thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So how can and should publishers apply the Lean Startup methodology?
Well, let's start with what Lean Startup is all about. It's fundamentally a management technique for people who face high uncertainty situations. So I believe entrepreneurship is the management discipline that deals with high uncertainty. And when you are publishing a new book, or any really new piece of media, where you don't know, it's not a sequel to something that's been successful before, you fundamentally don't know who the audience is going to be, you don't know how to project accurate sales figures, you have at best a guess or a hypothesis, then you're actually an entrepreneur, whether it says that on your business card or not. It really doesn't matter if you're an editor or a publisher, author, you are an entrepreneur. And so the techniques that we've developed in Lean Startup are about rapidly testing those hypotheses to figure out what's true and what's not. Now, I am here at the conference and happy to talk to people in the publishing industry. I have tried to avoid telling people what they should do, because I get the sense people in publishing are basically deluged with all kinds of crazy outsiders coming in constantly. Like, you should do this, you should do that. It's all so easy, no big deal.
Right.
So all I can really speak about is my experience launching my own book, where I felt like the challenge of building this business book for a mainstream business audience was a classic entrepreneurial challenge, and the techniques that we used in the launch were all derived from the content of Lean Startup. I felt like I'd be a big hypocrite if I didn't use those ideas, plus I didn't think it would be effective either. And so by the time, for the 18 months before the launch of the book, we were constantly testing to figure out not just what the content of the book should be, but also how it should be marketed and positioned. And over the course of we started taking pre-orders for the book a year before the book came out. Mm-hmm. So long before it was on Amazon, just simple web page where we were collecting people's money. We had to enter those orders manually into Amazon. It was a huge pain. We did about 10,000 pre-orders total over the course of hundreds of different experiments. And everything about the book, the cover, the title, the subtitle, and of course the content itself, was subject to a lot of testing to figure out what actually could motivate people to take their credit card out and buy this book.
Sure.
And then not only do we make those sales, not only did that help the book debut strong, number 2 on the bestseller list and all that stuff, it also gave us this community of evangelists who got to feel like they were part of the creation of the book. They were co-creators with us of the book itself. And that was also really important in the launch as well.
So I know feedback's an important component of it. How much customer feedback should be driving books? Should it be fully customer driven? It's a big issue in the publishing space.
It's come up already so many times at the conference. So imagine I was a scientist and I was trying to do physics and I wanted to learn about the structure of the atom, and I came to you and I said, I'm trying to do physics, but you know what? The electrons don't know what they want and they can't do a focus group, so forget it. Science is impossible. You'd be like, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. And yet that is the exact argument I've been hearing over and over again from publishers. It's like, well, because customers don't know what they want, therefore what customers want is irrelevant. And I just that's not science. What we're trying to do is be much more scientific in testing our beliefs. And science is only as good as your hypothesis. So you have to have vision, you have to have the conviction of where you're trying to go in order to use data effectively. Most of the so-called experimentation that people have been talking about here is not experiment, they're not experiments at all. It's just throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. Well, if I'm a chemist and I go into a chemistry lab and I'm like, I'll just throw some chemicals around to see what sticks. That's not chemistry, no. Having a hypothesis means you have conviction that you have a book or a media property or a startup or a product that can change the world in a very specific way. So for the Lean Startup, I already had a very successful blog, and I, reached a lot of tech entrepreneurs. But when I thought about what are the problems in our world that need to be solved, that these ideas could help with, my realization is that most of the resources that are being wasted, most of people's time that's being wasted, is being wasted inside established companies, inside governments and nonprofits, big institutions. It's not your Silicon Valley entrepreneurs that are causing the problem. So I was able to say, all right, I want to reach those people. And then how do you do that? Well, a book is still a pretty good way, but not just any kind of book, not a book that would be published, just as a technical manual that would be read only in Silicon Valley. It had to be a mainstream business book. That means it had to be a best-selling business book. That means that we had to have, that large number of orders all hit on the first week. And so we started to take this huge problem of change the world to make people stop wasting time, and we're narrowing in on a very specific objective that relates to this book. And that unlocked the possibility of testing a lot of our ideas about what would in fact work to reach that audience, to get the book to do that. And many of our specific ideas about how to do it were totally wrong. That's actually par for the course. But at no time were we asking customers what to do. So there was no focus groups. Never once did we do a survey where we just said, hey, tell us what you think we should do. That's abdicating our responsibility as artists, as entrepreneurs, as scientists. So It was about testing the vision to discover which elements work and which ones don't.
Interesting. So how can iteration be applied to the sorts of editorial products that in the past have taken 18 months, 2 years to build?
Yeah. We know that books don't actually take 18 months to build. If I look at the 18, I asked, when I signed my publishing contract, I asked for the expedited process, which I was told was about 18 months. That was as fast as it could be done.
Right.
And so in those 18 months, how much time was actually spent on the editorial production of the book itself? Very little time. Most of the time was either me waiting for my editor or him waiting for me. It was dealing with all the intricacies of the publishing process, the catalog, the, figuring out the marketing campaign, tons of activities that are all important but have nothing to do with the production of the book. The reason we know that is universally true is you go to any publisher and say, tell me about that one time when the CEO of the company said we have to get this book out right away. How long did it take? Right, between the time someone told me a story, it was like Lance Armstrong decides I want to write a book and the Tour de France is in 6 weeks. So it's got to be on shelves. Okay? It can be done in 6 weeks. So if it can be done in 6 weeks, what the hell is the 18 months all about? Well, it's about fitting a zillion books, far too many, into this crazy waterfall process. And what they learned in manufacturing, the reason we call it lean startup is because of an insight that happened in manufacturing called lean manufacturing, was that working in these supposedly efficient silos where everyone's in their department and the work product is passed from department to department to department seems very efficient and is actually radically inefficient. And so the first publisher to restructure their process around these principles is going to have a huge competitive advantage over their rivals.
So last question, related to that, are there publishers or content companies that you feel are starting to move towards that?
No.
Nobody.
Look, if you look at the industry, first of all, the one realization that has not hit publishing yet is that if you make content, you're in the software business. It's like, too bad. I know you don't want to be in the software business. I know managing software is a pain in the neck, but tough, you're in the software business. Very few publishers, this is true across all media, have had that insight. And so if you look at in the supply chain, who's accumulating all the power? It's software companies like Amazon, Apple, and Google. So Amazon does this incredibly well. Their engineering teams are run as little mini startups internally. They have an iteration speed that would make the rest of us gasp. So that's where the power is flowing. And I think that if today's incumbents want to start working in that style, they can make the transition, or they'll be displaced by, I know plenty of startups who are gunning for them right now. And personally, I just said this yesterday to a group of publishing executives, I'm personally indifferent whether the publishers make the transition or they get disrupted by somebody who gets it. All I care about is that in the future, we have a much more meritocratic decision-making process, publishing process, so that the actually best ideas can have the widest audience. And that's definitely going to happen.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure. Thank you.